Okay, we are live streaming now. Wonderful. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining us today from. And welcome to today's live webinar. My name is Sally Eganak, and I am in charge of scholarly content at My Science Work here in Paris, and I'll be moderating today's session. So today's webinar is organized by My Science Work. We are fully booked. We have some 500 registrants. Participants are muted, but please use the chat to introduce yourself and post any questions that you have or even comments. And we will try to address as many of them during the Q&A session towards the end of the presentations. So there is a recording of the webinar, and the recording will be made available via the My Science Work YouTube channel, so you can access it anytime you wish. Yeah, that's being said, let's hop into the webinar. So maybe first things first, maybe I can introduce you to My Science Work, and for those of you who are not familiar with us, open science and open access remains an important priority here at My Science Work. We've been active on the open science for over a decade now, across different aspects, so popularizing research outputs, projects, helping researchers and research institutions with open access publications, providing them with open source data-driven repositories and analytical solutions for scholarly content, that sort of thing. We also work very closely with publishers across multiple facets. So from a scientific dissemination and popularization standpoint, we help promote scholarly content across our nearly 1 million audience. Publishers also index content within My Science Work database. And finally, our team of data scientists, we provide data science solutions and tools for scholarly content for multiple purposes, such as the extraction of concepts and named entities, then empower semantic search to increase readership, automate citation, identification, extraction, and sentiment analysis, finding reviews by building co-authorship collaboration graphs. So a lot of good stuff, to name a few. So naturally, our stake in open science and also our close collaborations with various research stakeholders, we are absolutely thrilled to finally to be able to bring together this highly requested discussion, and even more so the fantastic lineup of speakers we have for the day. So the goal of the webinar today is to take stock of this journey made since the launch of Panelist, and focus on the evolution of publishers, so open access business models, and the challenges and the opportunities that remain open. And without further ado, please let me introduce you to our esteemed panelists, who are truly giants in their own capacities and respective fields. So Professor Johan Rurik, as I'm sure most of you are well acquainted with, he's the Executive Director of Collision-S. He is also the linguistics professor at Leiden University. He has over 20 years of experience as an editor, first as the executive editor of Lingua Elsevier, and since 2015 as the founder and the editor-in-chief of the Fair Open Access journal Glossa. It's a journal of general linguistics. He is the president of Quality Open Access Market, founding member and president of the Fair Open Access Alliance. He's also the founding member of Mathematics in Open Access and Psychology in Open Access, founding member and president of Linguistics in Open Access, I can go on, and member of the Academia Europea. So it's an absolute treat to have you here today, Professor Rick. So thank you for joining us. We also have Dr. Nick Campbell. He is the Vice President for Academic Affairs at Springer Nature. He joined NPG in 2001 and since been an editor on Nature Reviews Genetics. He's the executive editor of Nature and also holds the role as the director of Nature portfolio he held the role, if I'm not mistaken, the role as director of the Nature portfolio in China. Dr. Campbell's first degree, PhD, and postdoctoral research were in genetics, and he is deeply involved in the Panelist discussions. I'm also very pleased and very excited to have Miss Ashley Farley with us here today. She is the program officer at she is the program officer of Knowledge and Research Services at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And within this capacity, Ms. Farley, she leads the foundation's open access policy implementation and associated initiatives. So this includes the the work around the Gates Open Research, which is a transparent and a revolutionary publishing platform, and other co-activities involve supporting the strategic and operational aspects of the Foundation's library. So a warm welcome to the panelists and to all of you joining us today. So coming to the topic, open access publishing it has in fact been a hot topic for several years, and now with Panelist in motion and also fast-tracked by the COVID-19 pandemic, OA is poised to become the new normal. So before we move on to the core elements of the webinar, I'd like to kick off by reflecting upon the elements of open, in the sense open to whom, for what purpose, because it's important for contributors and other research stakeholders to understand that open access publishing is not some kind of a box checking component to please founders, funders, or politicians, but is in fact an absolutely important readjustment of academic publishing and knowledge sharing. So Dr. Campbell, what is your viewpoint on the collective viewpoint of Springer about the role of open access and in a changing publishing paradigm?
Well, firstly, let me say thank you very much, Sally, for inviting me, and it's great to be here with a distinguished panel. I've got a few slides that I'm going to talk to as I answer your very nice question. I guess I'd like to return to the big picture a little bit, and that is that open access is just really one step on a broader path that we're taking towards open science. And as an organisation, and I guess, and I'd also speak for me personally, we're keen to see that process accelerate, to have accelerated adoption of open research practices, to allow better collaboration, to help allow research to be better applied to real world problems. The benefits that open science is going to deliver are huge for both research and for broader society. Increased efficiency and reproducibility. They're going to help smooth the path to turning research into innovations that can make a real positive impact on society. So the payoffs are going to be huge, and that's why politicians are really interested in this as a topic, because they see the society payoffs from this as being a big part of what open science is all about. But even if we just look at open access on its own, it can make a huge difference just making that transition. If you think about scholarly communication, it accounts for perhaps 1% of all expenditure on research, but it's a really important 1%. And by moving to models where we get rid of paywalls around research articles, we can improve on the return on the investment of the rest of the 99%. By helping improve reproducibility, ensuring faster innovation. And we've really seen that play out in real time during the COVID pandemic. So personally, I'm delighted with the way we're heading as a research community, and also pleased that Springer Nature is committed to this path as well. So we started that transition some time ago, as is shown by our overall OA portfolio. In fact, just recently, we've become the first publisher to publish 1 million open access articles. So a quarter of everything we've published since 2005 has been gold OA, and more than a third of the articles we published in 2020 were OA. So overall, we account for 16% of all OA primary research papers. So that's great. A nod to what we've achieved already, but there's still a long way to go to achieve more. And I think one of the key ways in which we are achieving more and we are getting to that full open access transition is through transformative agreements. So transformative agreements, and we pioneered these, are really showing their worth in terms of getting there. And we see that pattern where we've got transformative agreements, particularly at a national level, almost over 80% plus of the papers we publish ultimately are published open access that are covered by transformative agreements. So that's real progress in terms of turning primary research papers from closed access, from behind paywalls, and taking them out and putting them so they're available to everybody wherever they are in the world. So it's a really important transition that we're seeking to make. actually, the final comment I'll make is that those transformative agreements are proving to be the most effective way of doing that. But it's great to see the momentum that's been injected into the whole process by Panelist, and I think Panelist should take a great deal of credit for that. And that's probably the last point I'll leave you with.
Understanding where we are with Panelist as of today will certainly provide a solid foothold to discuss advantages, disadvantages, challenges, and also opportunities of flipping scholarly publishing to open access. Professor Rurik, 2021 is bringing about fundamental changes for Europe's researchers regarding how to publish articles and papers. There's Horizon Europe going on, then there's Panelist in full motion, all of which requires immediate and full open access. Several paths exist to comply with these new requirements. There's also the EUA, European University Association, that's joined forces with Coalitionist to develop a practical, flexible checklist to support universities with this transition. Could you please probably share with us some of what some of these are and where we are headed with Panelist?
Yes, thank you. I'll share my screen and I'll give you a general presentation of what we're aiming to do with Panelist and Coalitionist. I think you should be able to see this, correct?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, so Coalitionist is an organization of 27 organizations, an alliance, in fact, of organizations, 27 organizations worldwide, national funders from Austria to the UK, not just in Europe, also including Quebec. And it also includes, crucially, the European Commission, the biggest funder in Europe, as you may know, and a number of charitable foundations, some of whom have representatives on this call, like the Bill and the Gates Foundation, represented by Ashley, but also we have the Wellcome Trust, Templeton World Charity, Howard Hughes Medical Institute. You will see a lot of medical funders here. We also have, in the same kind of medical field, World Health Organization on board, but also representatives from Jordan, Zambia, South Africa, and African American Academy of Sciences. To give you an idea about the funding, we jointly, the Coalitionist funders invest about $40 billion in research money per year, and that results in about 150,000 articles per year that are jointly, peer-reviewed articles that are jointly published per year, to give you an idea of the size and scope of the coalition. Well, why was Panelist divided? Well, Panelist was divided basically out of a sense of frustration. Frustration with the hybrid open access model. Hybrid open access journals, as you probably know, are journals that have part of their content behind the paywall and part of their content in open access, and that the frustration of the funders was that this percentage had not changed over the last 10 years, that this had remained stuck at about 20% of open access. So the funders thought that it was really important that the transition towards open access needed to be accelerated and wanted to give that a push. So the reason for that is something that Nick already pointed out. We want all research articles to be fully reusable immediately. There's about 2 million, figures differ, but there's about 2 million research articles published every year. And these need to be made available to not only to human researchers, but also to new technologies, AI technologies that allow to harvest data and allow with new techniques to uncover new knowledge. Of course, Nick already said it, in the COVID-19 epidemic, this became, of course, a necessity. And but of course, we also need this for other societal challenges, thinking climate change, and we never know where the next big idea will come from. And this is why we need open access. You know, new ideas might come from India, from South America, where people need access to all research immediately, and that is the purpose of the funders. The funders want their money, their research money, to be used maximally. So this is why Panelist came up with a number of strong principles. Open access must be immediate without embargo periods. Publication of all articles funded by Coalitionists should be with the CC BY license, which allows for the biggest reuse and allows the author to share. No hybrid model of publication is supported except as a transitional arrangement with a defined endpoint. So we make it very clear that hybrid that wants to remain hybrid is off limits for us, that we will no longer pay for that. But we will pay for hybrid journals that make a commitment into to moving towards open access. And I will come back to that. We also want pricing, contracts and publication fees to be more transparent and in line with the services provided. More about that later. And the funders also commit to pay for these publication fees. Namely, we do not want individual researchers to pay with their grandmother's inheritance. We want the research money of the funders to pay for those publications. Then we also are committed to changing research outputs and changing the research assessment of researchers. We no longer want to rely on quantitative factors such as the journal impact factor or the prestige of the journal that people publish in, but we want to evaluate the quality of the research. And many of our funders are committed to that in the sense that they have made it clear that researchers applying for money will be evaluated according to new quality metrics that take into account the quality rather than the quantity of research. So in the implementation of Plan S, in fact, we favor no open access business models. I mean, gold, green, polka dot open access, we take it. We have no preference, no particular presence. We don't think either that there is a silver bullet approach to open access, but we have developed what we think is a pragmatic approach of complementary and integrated policies at all levels of open access. So that's why we seek alignment, of course, with various stakeholders, other organizations, university associations, Confederation of Open Access Repositories, and of course, we are in contact with publishing organizations about our policies, as well as with early career researchers to see how Plan S may affect their career path, since they're often being evaluated by older researchers who are not as committed to open access as they might be. We also have a network of ambassadors in the world of committed open access researchers who tell us what are the current concerns in their field and also in their regions. And so we are in constant contact with them. Yes, we have 3 routes to open access, and we say we support various models. The first route is the easy one in a way. This is publishing in fully open access journals that are registered in DOAJ, Directory of Open Access Journals. Coalition as funders will financially support publication fees for the author in these venues, fully open access journals. Or in diamond journals, of course, as well. The second route is the more controversial one. That's the route for subscription journals and for some hybrid journals. Namely, authors publishing in these journals are required to make a copy of the author-accepted manuscript available in a repository immediately on publication. This is not financially supported by Coalition as funders because, of course, subscription journals are already paid for by the subscription, or by and hybrid journals by the hybrid open access fee. And then the third route that we also support, and Nick already mentioned this one, is transformative arrangements and transformative agreements. Authors who want to publish in a journal that is under a transformative arrangement, of course, are free to do so. And some coalition as funders will financially support these transformative arrangements where they can. The route 2, the green route, the route of depositing an article in a repository, is supported by our rights retention strategy, which aims at supporting researchers in their application of the CC BY license. First and foremost, the rights retention strategy is about applying a CC BY to the AAM of a paper. So we ask authors to add a statement to their submission, namely the statement that the CC BY license is applied to the AAM that will arise from their submission. By doing so, that CC BY license becomes inherent in the publication. The CC BY license is basically a statement that says, I, the owner, the intellectual owner of this article, state that this article is available for reuse, as long as proper credit is given. That is basically it. But it is a way for the author to claim their rights on that article and to assert and to give other people rights to work further on that article. This allows authors to publish, or to seek publication at least, in a journal and deposit a copy in an open access repository at publication, as long as the publisher allows for it, of course. And since this CC BY license is in place before any copyright transfer agreement, that CC BY license will take legal precedence over any conflicting language in the publication agreement. This is important for us because it allows researchers to take back control of the distribution and reuse of their papers. We have received some publisher pushback. There's a few cases of outright refusal of submissions with the RS language, but we've mainly seen a lot of smoke and mirrors, confusion for authors. I mean by that. So authors will be steered away to journals that are fully open access with an APC. There will be misleading information, and also sometimes authors will be asked to sign a contract not to disseminate the AAM, which is in violation of their grant agreement. So of course, the grant agreement states, look, you must share the AAM, and you must apply a CC BY license, and then the publisher comes in with a different contract that contradicts that agreement, putting the author in a very difficult position. There's been a reaction from EUA and César about this, asking for clarity. We also think that repositories are very well up to this task. We also think that, in fact, these AAMs in the repositories are free publicity for publishers. So we do not understand very well why there is so much pushback. There's also now an open door repository assessment service that allows to strengthen these repositories, and we really think that they deliver an important service for researchers, pointing always, of course, to the version of record that is in the custody of the publisher. Nick already talked about transformative arrangements. Now, transformative arrangements refer to publishing models where, in fact, it is the way the publisher is committed to transitioning subscription and hybrid to open access. This is mostly done in agreements with library consortia. So library consortia negotiate deals that not only give access to reading the papers, but also access for their researchers to publish in those journals. That is what a transformative agreement does. They are also called read and publish deals. We have also a model that is called subscribe to open, that is actually very good for smaller journals probably. And we also have transformative journals, which is our own version of transformative arrangement. Like I said, this is something that occurs at the level of library consortia, and Coalitionist, of course, is not a library consortium, but this is something that we support because we think it is an important lever towards open access. Some funders financially contribute to these, others do not. That really depends on the jurisdiction. And this has been a huge success. As Nick already mentioned, it's a huge success for Spring and Nature journals, but it is also a huge success for all publishers. For instance, these data come from the ESAC Transformative Agreements website. And what you see is between 2015 and 2021, a massive increase in the number of articles that have been made open access through this mechanism. Like I said, Coalitionist also has its own transformative journal model, which makes sure that hybrid journals can transition to open access in a very short time period, year on year. Journals have to reach a certain number of targets of open access content gained, and I'm happy to say that Spring and Nature, for instance, is a member of it with about 1,700 journals that are part of the transformative journal framework. Fully committed to moving these journals to open access in the next 4 to 5 years, we hope. What do we do for researchers to find their way in this labyrinth of policies, so to speak? Well, we have the Journal Checker tool. The Journal Checker tool basically is a search engine that helps researchers navigate the complexity of open access. All researchers need to do is to type in their favorite journal, type in the funder that they work with, and type in their institution, and that will give an outcome. It will tell the researcher, you need to pay a called open access fee. It tells the researcher, you are under transformative agreements, so not to worry, the fee is being paid for you by your library, or you will need to use the rights retention strategy. Here is how you do that. We also aim for price and service transparency. We aim to make nature and prices more transparent. We are working on those as we speak, actually. We are setting up a price transparency service where 2 possible price transparency frameworks can be used by publishers to make their prices available. For reasons of competition law, publishers will not be able to see each other's price information, but the service will be accessible to university libraries, consortia, and to funders to establish whether prices are fair and reasonable. And we hope that this will exert downward pressure on prices when people can see what the prices are across publishers for similar publications. We also are working on Diamond publishing. Diamond Open Access, as you know, is a service of publication that is free for authors and for readers. So readers don't pay a fee to access, authors don't pay a fee to publish. This is often done by institutions. It's often non-commercial, community-owned and scholar-owned. We launched a study on Diamond Open Access publishing last year. The results of that came out this year in March, and there were a number of recommendations there. A survey of 1,619 journals and focus group interviewed shows that there's a large number of open access journals out there, about 29,000, 11.5 of which are in the directory of the open access journals. These journals are not just in social sciences and humanities, as we might have expected, but there's also 17% in medicine, 22% in science, and they still produce a large amount of articles in fully open access journals, as you can see. They serve a wide diversity of communities. They're often very small. They publish very often between 15 and 50 articles a year, so those are small journals, and they're frequently multilingual. The recommendations of the study were that we should organize a workshop and a symposium within 6 months, and that will be done now in February of the next year. There will be a workshop in Paris about Diamond Open Access publishing. We have to come up as a coalition with a funding strategy for Diamond, because it's not because Diamond is free to the readers or free to the authors that it doesn't cost money. Obviously, it costs money to publish those journals. And we also were asked to set up a Diamond Publishing Capacity Center within 24 months. While that may be a bit soon, we are definitely thinking about doing that in the context of the EC Widera call, which I can say something more about during the question period. We also have open access for academic books. We recognize there that for our open access books, the timeline will be a bit longer. That's why we have 5 recommendations aligning our policies across the various publishers. All books, of course, should be made open access with a CC license, not necessarily a CC BY license, but definitely a CC license. We also agree that embargo periods should not exceed 12 months. So here we do allow for an embargo period, but we would like to see that phased out in the next 3 to 4 years, of course. And there's a commitment by Coalition S funders to financially support open access of books. And this implementation will be supported by contact with the open access books community and the open access books network. This is where I will stop, but this gives you, I think, a good overview of what we are trying to do and how.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Professor Ulrich. I would like to hop on to Ms. Farley right now, because the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is committed to information sharing and transparency. Since January 2021, they have adopted the open access policy to promote unrestricted access and reuse of all peer-reviewed published research funded in whole or in part by the foundation. Ms. Farley, what opportunities do you see in the alignment of the institutional action with Panelist?
Yes, happy to share. Thank you. Can you hear me and see my slides?
Loud and clear, and we can see your slides.
Perfect. Okay. So to do a quick overview, as you've just heard all about Panelist, we have joined, so there's no need to cover that. I just want to do a quick disclaimer. So to provide perspective of where I'm coming from, I've been a librarian my whole career, working both academic and public libraries. So I have a very much librarian knowledge should be a public good sort of perspective. I wanted to acknowledge too that I work at a very privileged institution. So we've been able to spend money on open access, and that's definitely a privilege, and not all institutions, no matter their type, can be able to do that. And then I wanted to say too that a lot of what I talk about are often, generalizations. So it's a hashtag not all publishers. There are many nuances in this ecosystem, and I don't mean to minimize anyone's work, but I think having tough and critical conversations will make the ecosystem better and stronger. Mm-hmm. And there's also copious amounts of research and information on this. My goal is to mainly spark a high-level conversation, probably more citations needed. So we actually started our open access journey in 2015 as a funder, a little late to the game, but we did, a great assessment of the ecosystem and followed other funders that have been very bold and strong in the open access space. So our policy has been around since 2015. It's been an all grant agreement since then. We launched Gates Open Research in 2016, which is one of my favorite projects to work on. Since we've started our open access policy, we've spent around 23 million in open access fees, which has gotten us around 9,000 articles. It's great to have those articles open access. I think we could also reflect on how that money was spent and how we could spend that differently to support the ecosystem. And then, noticing that there's been promising, but maybe a little movement in publishers changing policies to be compliant with our own. That was, along with our spend, some of the main reasons why we wanted to join Coalition S. I think also the collective action aspect of it as well is quite important. And it's been a really rewarding experience. I wanted to quickly highlight why open access is important to specifically, I think, funders. I think we're having a real shift in recent years in how we think about this and how removing barriers for reading, publishing, and engaging in the research community is aligned with our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. I think we've been focused on building better partnerships and really choosing, alignment of our mission and values, and not just kind of the product or the work that can be done. So I think that's very important for us to evaluate before we start partnerships. Extending the impact of our funding. So, Johan mentioned open licensing. I think that's very important for use and extending the impact of the research that we fund. Where our research is published is a powerful stamp of approval, and trying to get grantee authors to discuss that more with them about how it shouldn't be the other way around, but where, their research is published is definitely powerful. Without it, the journal or publishers really wouldn't exist. And where we spend our money is also powerful. So thinking more about how we want to build those better relationships if we're giving most of our money to some of the biggest publishers, and how they have other products and do business. I think that really matters. And so we're having more robust discussions around what that means. Extending, from publications to other research outputs. So publications is just kind of one glimpse at the whole knowledge outputs, and we want to make sure that other outputs are also openly available and ready to be reused. And again, as Johan had mentioned as well, that we want to shift from using publication venues as a proxy for career advancement or evaluation, and that it has become quite problematic. So I would really love to see us decouple knowledge creation and sharing from career advancement. So what have you learned about open access so far in this journey? I know policy is never really a fun topic, but I do think it really does bring about behavior change. From all stakeholders, policy definitely gets people's attention. I wanted to highlight that open access or open research does not have to equate to expensive publishing. It does not mean that it's low quality. It doesn't mean it's lacking peer review. And something I've been wanting to talk more about is how, the risk level of having things open, or the idea that it's always something being given away, and that there is a more equitable way to think about it of collaboration and sharing, and that you can use others as well as them using your work and giving credit. So it doesn't have to be just all about risk or just all about giving something away. I really hope that we're learning from the pandemic, and that we don't kind of recede back into common practices that I think we've seen do not benefit the research ecosystem as a whole. So we need to continue along the lines of more transparency, more collaboration, and less of the opposite. Most publishers are unlikely to give up control. However, they rely on the research community. It's trying to have those discussions again where the researchers' work is powerful, and they should want to retain as much rights to that work as possible, and that publishing should be structured more as a service that is paid for and helps the community in that way. And transparency is going to be, I think, a major topic for us moving forward. Of course, as we try to understand the true publishing costs, as we work through establishing and testing out new business models. I'm glad Johan mentioned the subscribe to open model. That's one of, I think, my favorite and promising ones for sustainable and affordable open access. How do we actually establish reasonable fees? And then having author choice. So this is one that, I'm really excited to support the rights retention strategy, because we've always had a very pay for open access, which limits authors' choice in where they can publish. And now in retaining rights, we're hoping that this gives more author choice of where they can publish, and then it's up to the publisher as to how do they react to the rights retention strategy. And again, highlighting the importance of partnering with publishers and vendors whose mission, values, and actions align with your own or our own is important. And I wanted to dig a little deeper into kind of our first 11-month experience. I can't believe it's almost been a full year of Plan S. And overall, yes, publishers have reacted in a range from supportive to not. We've definitely learned that communication has been quite important, and this can be one of the biggest barriers. We often don't know a lot of our grantee authors until they've already been through the publishing system. So it's a lot of education, talking, webinars, which is a great way to disseminate these changes. And just keeping in mind that behavior change isn't easy or quick, and it's really important that we count the successes where we can. Open access has been a long journey. I've been excited to work on it for the past 6 years, and I think the future is bright. Rights retention, I think, is something that, I mean, it's definitely, if anything, has really awoken the discussion around author rights, which I think is really important, because I think we've kind of fallen into the status quo of how we do things. So highlighting why retaining as much rights as possible to be able to have ownership over your work, share it the way you want, rebuild it the way you want with the community is really important. Again, taking time to leverage policy changes to take in the diversity, equity, and inclusion into real action. So instead of a lot of the talk, we really, I think this is, especially through publishing, is a way that we can really make sure that we're creating an equitable research ecosystem, so there's no financial barriers to participation, either on publishing or reading. And then, yeah, there's strength in numbers. So I think one of the biggest benefits of being part of the coalition is now I get to work with a global network who are advocating for open access and collectively working towards a common good. And then we've recently started on the topic of better partnerships, but a better open access kind of compliance and reporting through OA Works is something that we've been focusing on. And then, Sally, I don't know if it's too quick to talk about this, but wanted to mention, I was asked to kind of my purview of predatory publishing. And I think this is a really interesting topic, and it's one that, I think it needs a little bit of a narrative shift. So I think it's important to keep in mind that there's no agreed upon definition of predatory publishing. And then often when we talk about it, we can exclude legit localized journals. So when we talk about equity, we, I think, have a very kind of westernized view of what a legitimate journal can look like. And then it can also stymie the creation of new models, journals, or publishers, because there is kind of such fear to fall into a potential trap, and it's hard to start, I think, different models and attract authorship. And I love this comment piece that was, let's see, I have a link in when we share the slides, but it's, it really pointed out that known journals and publishers can partake in practices that many would also define as predatory. And there's also some even interesting evidence that some authors choose to publish in known journals. There's different reasons. The benefits could be the affordability, a much lower cost. They just want to get the publication out, faster publication. I've seen some of our own grantees that needed to publish to finish a PhD, or just needed to be done with a program and needed to get something out there. And so they chose that route after kind of exhausting all other means. So I find that aspect very interesting. And I think the solution would be to really open up peer review, since we don't even know a lot of the quality of peer review of the traditional publishing system. There's a lot of trust that goes into that as a reader. And I think opening up and having that transparency would be critical. We would actually kind of see the quality of the peer review process then of the journals. And also having the ability to talk about publishing experiences. I'm sure everyone often sees these discussions of experiences on Twitter, but there's a real hesitancy to name the journal or editor or publisher because of that tie to career advancement. I think is one of the many reasons, and the fact that they need to publish there in order to further their career. And I think that should really change, and we should be able to have honest discussions about publishing experiences. And then I also wanted to highlight the kind of the Sci-Hub aspect of it. I mean, Sci-Hub has definitely been great to provide access for those that aren't privileged enough to have it, but I think it's also kind of created this ecosystem where the privileged authors that have access no matter what, who feel like their colleagues and their close researcher contacts have access. So it creates kind of a not in my backyard sentiment of where you choose to publish behind a paywall is forcing someone else to potentially use illegal means to gain access to that content, and that's not good. Yeah, so I will stop there and look forward to questions and a robust discussion.
Thank you very much, Ms. Farley. Might I remind the attendees to use the Q&A section to address any questions you have for the panelists and not the chat, because it's much more easier to go through the questions and select a couple towards the end of this discussion. Okay, so Springer Nature is a strong advocate for open access, for open science, and as a part of this, big supporters of the Gold Open Access. With different types of transformative agreements replacing traditional subscription models in light of all transparency, it's important to take stock of risks as the sector moves towards a combination of publishing and subscription agreements. Dr. Campbell, maybe perhaps quickly, what are your thoughts with regards to the risks and also opportunities, be it in the fields of diversity and competition, or affordability, and also the sustainable operation of smaller publishers? What are your thoughts? Dr. Campbell?
Nick, you're muted.
I think you are. Yes, I think Dr. Campbell, you're muted.
Hey, how we go? How's that?
Perfect.
Am I on now?
Yes, you are.
You think I'd figured it out by now, wouldn't you? Number of meetings that everyone's had on Zoom. So what I was trying to say very badly was that we're making a fundamental transition here. We want to get to a point where all research is openly available. And so there are challenges along that path. And I think a couple of the challenges you see highlighted on this slide, there's complex funding patterns at the moment for open access. So there's a lot of funding that is currently being spent on APCs that is not tracked, not understood by the community and so on. We did a white paper on that a year or so ago now that shows that pattern, and also there's huge regional variation as well in both in terms of the way open access is funded, the pace of change as well, and I think you can see that has a few issues that it creates for us making a transition as quickly as possible. There's variation between fields as well. So I'm a geneticist by training. Johan's a linguist, very different fields, and they're very, very different positions in terms of their transition to open access and their readiness for going along this path. So there's lots of things that need to be getting over to. So the pace of change is going to vary. We heard Ashley talk about equity issues. Equity is a huge problem that we do need to overcome if we're able to make this transition in a sustainable but equitable way. And we haven't, let me be frank, I don't think as a research ecosystem, we've got the solutions at the moment. We've got publishers have waiver policies. We have waiver policies. They are a solution. They're not an ideal solution. We need a better way of taking the lower middle income countries with us on this path as well. So they're not inconvenienced. So they're not locked out from publishing like they have been locked out from reading some papers sometimes. So these are issues that need to be be dealt with. I'd also highlight that this variation in differences between different parts of the world also has implications in terms of transformative agreements and transformative approaches, which is why we did suggest transformative journals as an approach to Coalition S, and why we think it's a really important complementary and reinforcing approach to transformative agreements. These are, as I won't go through the slide because Johan eloquently already highlighted what transformative journals are doing. They're hybrids that are making a commitment to change, right? So then they're hybrids, but there's a clock ticking on these hybrids, and they have to meet these very challenging goals that Coalition S have put in front of these journals, including active promotion of open access benefits to those authors, and being transparent as well. We were a part of that, of developing the transparency framework that we are committing to. So these are all issues that need to be dealt with. I think transformative journals and transformative agreements are ways of helping us get there. I think we also need to look at, alluding back to my point about promoting the benefits of open access. When we're promoting transformative journals to the researchers that are authors or considering being authors for those journals, we need to show them that there's value in terms of what they're doing. There's value for their papers in going down the gold open access route. And so this slide just summarizes a recent white paper we released that tries to get an evidence base to back that up, to show that by going down a gold open access route, you're going to get a greater impact from your paper, whether that be an impact from the broader community or in your own research community. This going down this route is helpful and is something we should be promoting to you, to go down that path and help us meet those challenging targets of transformative journals. We want to grow and hit those targets year on year, and ultimately flip all these journals, all over 1,700 of them, as Johan mentioned, to full open access. And that's a key part of what we're trying to achieve here. And just to return to the overarching thing, I think to get there, to deal with all these issues, we need all the stakeholders to work together on this. We need researchers, publishers, institutions, and funders, as we have represented here by Ashley and Johan in his role as Executive Director of Coalition S. All of us need to go on this journey. All of us need to work on the solutions to get there. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. So that's my end of my contribution.
Wonderful. Perhaps one final question before we hop onto the Q&A, because I see that there's quite a number of questions. And this is an open question to all our three panelists. Plain and simple, what are your views on the future of open access publishing?
I'm happy to kick that one off.
Please.
No, I'm very excited because I think we are having all of the right discussions right now and seeing some really interesting movements, and we've been trying models. So I would like to see, in my kind of, I think, ideal state, that funders focus more on funding infrastructure long term. And that's something that I can say we've not been good at, but I think is very important. And I'm seeing more of a need for that. And then we see the library community supporting more of the day-to-day actions of publishing. That publishing is more of a service provided and paid for. That it's mission aligned, community driven. And I've loved seeing the discussions I've seen in the library community about how they want to spend their money in supporting really community led publishing, and also focusing more on the protection of especially data, and how authors are being tracked more, and surveillance around publishers. So I think we're it's been a long journey, but I think we're really at an interesting point where I'm seeing more robust decisions and more actions being taken than I think we have previously. So I am hopeful that we will get there.
Professor Rick, did you want to comment on the future of open access publishing?
I did the same as Nick. I forgot to unmute myself. Yes, gladly. Yes, I think we have to move towards open access publishing, and we need to do that together. I agree with Nick there. I was busy answering some questions actually.
I saw it. Yes.
In the Q&A. And there's a question there by Ross Mounts and by some others asking very pointedly, what will the world look like after 2024, when we have indeed said that we will no longer support transformative agreement. I mean, transformative agreements, of course, means that at one point, yes, the transformation should be reached, right, or almost be within reach, and that means that at that time you need to think of another way of paying for academic publishing, right? Which probably should not be APC based, because APCs are very inequitable. I mean, basically, APCs represent a single price for a service worldwide. Imagine one service in the world that is like that. I mean, it doesn't apply to aspirin, it doesn't apply to Coca-Cola, hamburgers, flight tickets. I mean, those have different prices all over the world, depending often on price, on purchasing power. I think we need to imagine and invent something like that rather than this current system of waivers, which is quite neo-colonial and found very offensive by people who have to ask for them. Moreover, these are different from one publisher to the next. So, you know, you don't see the forest for the trees with waivers. I mean, we know that there is enough money in the system globally to keep academic publishing going. It's just that the money is not in the right places and does not serve the right communities. So basically, that money needs to be redistributed in a fair and equitable way. We know that an African researcher, for instance, has about 11 times less money to publish in open access than a researcher in Singapore. Well, that is something that we need to take into account. Well, allowing that African researcher to pay their contribution to academic publishing, and maybe then the Singaporean or the North American author or funder needs to pay a little more. I mean, I think it is possible to imagine a system that exists in pharma, for instance, for equitable contributions to open access publishing, where if publishers were willing to adopt or accept a little bit of regulation, where they would be welcome to sit at the table to discuss that regulation in exchange for the security of income. I think that would be, for me at least, a reasonable world to organize commercial publishing. On the other hand, of course, we also have non-commercial publishing that is done by the academic community themselves, community-owned. This is something that I am very much in favor of, and I also hope to contribute in the future to making that much more of an alternative to commercial publishing. Also, hopefully, to put some pressure on commercial publishing to make the prices more in line with the costs, rather than with high profits for shareholders. Okay, I've said this. And
Dr. Campbell, that leaves you.
Well, I concur. It's very bright. The future of open access publishing is absolutely bright, and it's the way we're going to go. Right? We as an organisation will not be publishing research articles behind paywalls anymore in future. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Now, when is a big question, and you know, frankly, I don't think we're going to be there in the time frame that the coalition has set in terms of when their funding ceases. So because there's decisions that need to be made in lots of different parts of the world that are not represented in coalition S at the moment. So, you know, I think but the end point is the proximal endpoint is we're unified on, right? I mean, I think we all want to have open access, full and immediate open access, so that, you know, I've seen Ashley make comments on you know, getting rid of journals and so on. So maybe on that endpoint we don't necessarily entirely align in our opinions, but I think I think we're heading in the right direction, and I think open access publishing, again, going back to my very first comments, open access publishing is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end, right? It's helping us have a better scholarly communication system overall, but even more importantly, improve the flow of innovation from the research world into the broader community. And so I think that's the real big goal that we need to be focused on, and that governments need to be focused on.
Right. Okay. So we can hop onto the Q&A. I see that some of the panelists have already answered 11 questions, so that's fantastic. One of the questions is if they can have access to the chat, because there's quite a lot of interesting information there. If no one is opposing to this, then I could make the chat also available in the post-webinar communication, so I could send it across via email. Okay. So hopping on the questions itself. Lisa has a question regarding using RSS. Okay, so do you think using RRS mitigates that unethicalness? And I imagine she's referring to MPE going so far as to say that it was unethical for the individual, but was commenting on the design of the overall system. If you can point me to where he made that individual critique, I'd be appreciative. But to continue on the ask, do you think using RRS mitigates that unethicalness that is published behind a paywall, but provide access to an alternative? And I think Ms. Farley is already typing an answer, but I will let you.
Yeah. I can also say it out loud. I mean, I get the commenting on the overall design of the system, but we as individual players do contribute to that system overall. So I still think it's quite relevant. And I do think that RRS can mitigate for that unethicalness, because I can see how authors, especially in certain disciplines, we hear a lot about, economics is one where there's not a lot of open access options at all. Even if we were to pay for it, if there's no hybrid journal, it's often still very traditional subscription. But if that's one of the only outlets for publishing in, then at least if you leverage rights retention, there are so many great tools nowadays that really help surface open copies, that I think we're a lot more confident in kind of the green open access or self-archiving, so that those that encounter a paywall can more easily get around it. So I would say that does provide a more ethical alternative in the meantime.
Right. So we have rather a long question from an anonymous attendee. So I'm going to read it out. Apologies in advance for the long question. When establishing publication fees beyond unpacking a publisher's fixed and variable costs at the individual journal level, how do you propose accounting for publishers' substantial and expected spending towards the growth of the business, that is technological investments, people investments, new journal investments, general business administration? These necessary expenses are what allows publishers to take risks on new technologies, new processes, and new journals in evolving fields. There are also widely variable royalty payment expectations to also, for example, scholarly associations, which often desperately count on these revenues to develop their core programs and outreach to meet their mission. Finally, there are widely variable stipends paid across different fields to get top editors. Whenever publication fees and publication costs are brought up, they seem to be intentional fear for these demands in the interest of keeping perceived cost uniform and low. Did one of our panelists want to comment on this?
Yes, I'd like to comment on that. We actually do have in our price breakdowns. We have proposed 2 price breakdowns: one by the Fair Open Access Alliance, one by Information Power, and they do include price buckets for these kinds of things. For instance, if you look at the one of the Fair Open Access Alliance, I'm sorry, it's my phone.
It happens to the best of us.
If you look at the one of the Fair Open Access Alliance, we do allow for general costs, other business cost management and administration, but also scholarly society fees, for instance. Fees is something that needs to be taken into account. So of course, we have taken that into account in our breakdown of the fees, and that's also the case for the Information Power. We're not just looking at the mere process of publication, of course. That is part of it, journal operations and publication. But fees, communication, and general management costs and innovation costs are definitely part of the price breakdown as well.
So, Dr. Campbell, this one's for you. the astronomical price as opposed to cost of publishing OA in Springer Nature journals is unsustainable. Do you plan to make transformative agreements with small libraries, with independent researchers, with libraries in third world countries? Okay, the big name universities with lots of money may be covered, but what about the rest of the world? That is the majority. What's the plan here?
Well, so I guess I should first deal with that adjective astronomical prices. I don't think is appropriate, and so we do have one of the highest APCs, which is for nature journals, and there's a very specific reason why, and it's a very difficult model to transition. So let me just say that first up. But do we have a plan for transitioning? I think we have transformative agreements will be a huge part of the solution, and we've demonstrated their efficacy in Europe in particular, but increasingly around the world. Now you're going to have to look for creative solutions in different parts of the world. Now I think someone asked about subscribe to open. I think subscribe to open is a perfectly interesting and innovative model that will work in certain cases. It's not going to be a fully scalable model in all cases. And similarly, the types of transformative agreements we've had in Europe that we've seen are not going to work in the USA, because it's a much more fragmented system, and you're not going to get one national deal that covers the whole of the US. However, there are other innovative models that can work in those contexts, and so the one that we signed with California Digital Library, which is as big as a country in terms of research output, is an example of where a model that the library came up with, but we worked on with them, can work for a very research-intensive university that's actually stood to lose in many ways from this transition because of the disparity in their read versus publishing framework. So I think that's the sort of innovation we need. And then we talk about LMICs. I've already flagged that is a key issue with that we have to face as a global community. Will there be solutions? Yes, there will. I agree with Johan's point that waivers are not an ideal solution. They're a band-aid at the moment, and they're what we do, but it's what pure OA publishers do. It's what we do. It's what other and so they are some sort of solution at the moment. They're not the ultimate solution. And I think there will be solutions that will ultimately apply. They've got to apply, because ultimately we need a world in which every paper is every research paper is available to everybody, and also I totally agree with Johan's point around APCs. We need an APC-free world ultimately as well, in terms of the researchers having to pay from their own pocket. So I don't think we've got all the solutions. Let's be frank at the moment. There's a ways to go, but I think we can get there, and I think we're on the path.
We are on the path. We will probably take 2 more questions. I see the panelists are also addressing some of the questions directly. So Dr. Campbell, this is for you as well, and the other publishers. Once we have switched to a fully published model, what annual inflationary costs for APCs do you feel will be sustainable and reasonable?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. I think it's the thing about how prices are going to go up in future when we have a world in which there's a lot more centralized agreements, for example. I don't think it's actually about the APC fees on a per article basis that you get to. I think the most important thing that, again, we all need to address is the growth in output in general, right? Because that's where I'd agree with Johan's point around there's probably enough money in the system right now, or maybe a few years ago, to make the transition as a whole globally, and it's not all in the right places. But the fact is that currently we've got increasing publications at 3 to 7% per year, right? So that's non-inflationary. That's more than inflationary increase in terms of the numbers of papers, right? So even to keep to an inflationary increase, we have to get the costs of doing it down on a per article basis. So I think one key question I would pose to the research community as a whole is, should we be publishing more or less? I mean, I think that's a real fundamental issue. Yes. I mean, and that's a perfectly a perfectly defensible position, and one that I have a great deal of sympathy for.
Or published differently, I think is,
Yes, and that's also why it's so important to have to address research assessment. I mean, currently researchers are assessed on quantity, so they will salami slice their results into 10 different articles where a single article would have sufficed. So that needs to change. I mean, authors do no longer need to be assessed in terms of the quantity of articles they publish, or in the terms of the prestige of the journals where they publish in. So things can be streamlined a lot more. I mean, I also think that there's still a lot of scope with some publishers, not everyone perhaps, but for streamlining processes and for better submission systems, for instance. I mean, I've been an editor for 20 years and I still have to see the perfect submission system.
There's not one out there that I know of. So,
and so there's a lot of scope for improvement of the basic processes, I think, and indeed from less articles, definitely that.
I mean, so I think less articles is again defensible, but we want more sharing, right? We want more openness, more sharing.
Less articles, and more
less
sharing.
articles, more sharing. So what does that look like as a vision? I think
it looks more like a platform model that we've seen. That's why I really like Gates open research, because it could support I don't want to say cheap, but inexpensive, like micro publishing, which I think is a really interesting.
But that's more concept. Articles, right? That's more stuff.
If you call it articles, but if you're charging
it's more publications. Let's say that.
No, but it's also more
information.
Stuff, but not all of that stuff needs the same kind of curatorial attention.
Right.
Exactly. I think an article needs to be published and needs to be properly copy edited and typeset. The reviews coming with that article don't need to be typeset. I mean, it would be silly to be typesetting reviews. I mean, I can't see anyone doing that or the necessity for that. But that discussion needs to be available for the community, and that of course requires different submission systems and different the publication platforms. I mean, there is very few publication platforms that allow to handle that very easily. Open peer review, for instance, right now, and that afford also authors of reviewers the option of making their reviews available or not. For instance, to make open peer review more of an option that is controlled by the reviewer and the editors, rather than something that is either imposed or disallowed. Right, those kind of things. I mean, we need to think much more creatively about the different levels of openness, the different kinds of information that needs curatorial attention or not. So that is much more. I mean, we need to move also to a record of versions rather than the version of records, so that the entire discussion becomes available from initial submission to the final product. So there's a lot of work to do.
Yes.
I mean, but it doesn't necessarily have to cost a gazillion dollars.
We are definitely going somewhere with this discussion, but unfortunately, we are pressed for time. I do see that we've answered somewhere close to 25, 23 questions. So I will try to share answers to these questions, and there's a lot more to be discussed on the topic, but as I said, we are pressed for time, and this has been most enlightening. On behalf of my science work and all of you joining me here today, I'd like to thank our panelists for their precious time and their most valuable insights. I hope to welcome you all here again on the 25th of January, where I'll be bringing together a panel of experts to discuss artificial intelligence and how it's redefining the scholarly communications landscape. So stay tuned for that. We'll be communicating about this webinar across our social media channels. For those of you who joined us late, a copy of this webinar replay, including links to the slides, the presentations, and also the Q&A and the chat. Most of you have requested a copy of the chat. Will be linked to the description and will be sent across via email. So thank you very much once again for joining us and for your time, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.